All right. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Jacob McCormick. I think I know most of you, but I am your photo archivist here at the Capitol building. Also happen to be a Michigan State Spartan, so I've an interest in this topic, and I've always read about and been fascinated by the history of the university and of the campus. So finding all of these sometimes niche and sometimes very well-known connections between our capital city and Lansing and East Lansing and the Agricultural College has been fascinating. I've known a bit of it for a long time, but I've also uncovered a lot of really fascinating details that I had no idea about that I'm excited to share with you all tonight. And maybe some of you will all learn something along the way too. How many people went to Michigan State in the room? A few? All right, cool. Very good. So you're going to recognize a lot of names tonight. That's the fun part about talking about college history is you'll say, oh, that's a road or that's a building or something, which I love. That's a highlight for me. So I'm going to dive right in. The beginning of this, we'll talk about four tangible or physical direct links between the Capitol and MSU. They're going to be very obvious when I talk about them. After that, we're going to dig into sort of a chronological telling of how the Agricultural College came to be, what the impetus is, who thought of it, all those good things. And then we'll talk through the Hanna years and all of those connections between the legislature and that good stuff. So let's dive in. We'll start with one of those tangible connections, and that is Adam Oliver. Adam Oliver was a Scottish-born, Kalamazoo-based landscape architect who was hired from 1872 through 1887 to lay out the campus at the Agricultural College. He laid out the walks, the trees, the drives, some of the buildings. On the left is, I believe, one of his plans of campus from the MSU archives. By the way, unless it's labeled otherwise, everything's from the MSU archives and historical collections in this presentation, for the most part, except for this screen, which is not labeled correctly. So on the left is MAC's campus. And on the right is the Capitol's layout. Now, this is an Elijah Myers drawing, but Adam Oliver also did the Capitol's grounds in 1878 before the building opened. So we have a direct connection in that both of our grounds were laid out by the same man. And these are some visuals of that direct visual comparison between the two pieces of land. Another one of those tangible connections is Elijah Myers, our architect here at the Capitol. He, of course, wins the contest to design this building, the Michigan State Capitol, in 1871. Over the course of the next 6 years, his design is built here in Lansing. And just 2 years after he wins the contest to design this building, he is awarded the contract to design 3 total homes on Faculty Row at MAC, including the President's House, which is pictured up top there in the cyanotype photograph. In addition to designing the homes, we know that he was hired to supervise the construction of them as well. Ultimately, though, through the Board of Agriculture, Board of Trustees meeting minutes, we know that there was some sort of settlement between Myers and the college. So I don't know for sure whether he actually did oversee the construction or whether it ended with his designing of the buildings, with the President's House being chiefly among them here. And those Myers buildings on campus don't survive, by the way. The third of those tangible connections is the Donaldson and Meyer architectural firm based in Detroit. If you walk out front or if you spend any time out in the east lawn of the Capitol, you'll recognize the base of the Austin Blair statue. Donaldson and Meyer designed that base in 1898 for the erection of the Austin Blair Monument. They also went on 30 years later to design Beaumont Tower on campus. So again, that direct architectural connection, the visual connection for that architectural firm across those 5 miles. And the last direct connection, though there are plenty that I could talk about, I'll end with John Coppin. John Coppin is one of our portrait artists here at the Capitol. He did 4 gubernatorial portraits: Van Wagner, Kelly, Siegler, and Williams, which hang on our 3rd floor rotunda currently. He also did, in 1954 and 1955, a series of paintings for the Michigan State College Centennial. This is one of those paintings showing the Spartan statue, Spartan Stadium in the background. And I always like to compare these 2 images because Governor Siegler and Sparty are painted in this almost Herculean stature with the clouds behind them. And even looking at the Williams portrait, the sky is very in the background is very reminiscent of these MSU portraits, because that is notably the one portrait done after the MSC paintings. So that is the four tangible real life connections that I'll draw between Michigan State and the Capitol. And from here, I want to dig into how the Agricultural College came to be. So we'll start at the beginning, and we'll start with a man named Bela Hubbard. And I'll lay out where this whole idea comes from. So in 1849, at the creation of the Michigan State Agricultural Society, one of the trustees is Bela Hubbard, and he gives an address to the Michigan legislature upon the creation of this society. He is an early geologist of the state and a surveyor of early Michigan. He was an assistant to state geologist Douglas Houghton, actually. And in his address to the legislature, Hubbard and the society collectively call for the creation of an agricultural college and a model farm. Initially, Hubbard pitched the idea of the agricultural college to be a part of the University of Michigan, which already existed at the time. Eventually, though, he used the Michigan Farmer, which is a publication distributed to nearly every farmer across the state, and read by all of them, and that's how they got their news about agriculture in the state. He writes in there, again calling for the legislature to establish an agricultural school. He wrote that the state should establish, and I'll quote here, a state central agricultural office with which shall be connected a museum of agricultural products and implements, and an agricultural library, and as soon as practicable, an agricultural college and model farm. So these are some of the first instances of people publicly calling for the creation of an agricultural school. The 1850 Michigan Constitution, which comes just a year later, 2 years later, provided for the creation of an agricultural school, but it offered the possibility of its creation as a branch of the University of Michigan or an independent institution. I laid out a plan to establish the school on unappropriated salt spring lands or to purchase new land from the sale of those lands from the state. So there are options laid out in this 1850 Constitution. So both Hubbard, the Agricultural Society, and that 1850 Constitution created the question, would the college be independent or would it be a department within the existing university? And this is where we get to the beginning of the rivalry, I'll say. So at the time, University of Michigan's president is Henry Tappan, and he is a proponent of the university branch approach. It was deemed to be more economical, and he fought hard in the 1850s to create an agricultural department within the University of Michigan. Briefly, I'll mention it aside here. The Michigan Normal School, which is now Eastern Michigan University, also vied to create an agricultural department to also fill that gap in offerings for state higher education, but that didn't last as long as Michigan's attempts to get that department. So Tappan desired to make the university the first in the world. He said that agriculture belonged to the university, so they could be the best. And without it, that would leave a hole in their offerings, as I just said. So the problem here is there was no space for a model farm nor a desire for a farm at the university in Ann Arbor. As a result of that, that is one tick against the university. So, and I'll get to the opposite side of this in just a second. I will say that in 1857, this is after the decisions are made and the creation happens. Tappan says that normal colleges and agricultural colleges were lesser than universities. So therefore, he should get the agricultural department still, even after it's already created as a new college. Proponents of the separate institution angle wanted a model farm. They got a practical farm and an experimental farm, and I think what was always intended was that experimental farm. That's what they needed, and that's what they wanted. Farmers wanted their sons to have a full, well-rounded education, not just be out on the farm being taught about agriculture, but they wanted them to be able to study English and study other topics while they're at college, to have that full, well-rounded education. John Holmes, who we're going to talk a bunch about in just a second, was the chief proponent of a separate institution. He said without a farm, an agricultural school would not be successful, nor what farmers had envisioned for their sons. The core need for an agricultural college was agricultural experimentation, and that needed a farm. The Michigan Farmer, that publication I mentioned, vied for a separate college. People who wrote in were vying for a separate college. One Michigan farmer named Philo Cultus said to create a new institution that offered more than, and I'll quote him here, a few third and fourth rate lectures on the science and art of agriculture, which I read as a slight on the university's plan to offer a department. This discussion took place before and during the debates about the creation of an agricultural program or an agricultural college. And the hand of one man, for the most part, is largely responsible for the creation of the institution we know today. And that man is John Clough Holmes. Now, John Holmes is said to have had more impact on MAC than John Harvard had on Harvard. William J. Beale, an early agricultural professor, one of the fathers of Michigan State, called Holmes the most important agent of MAC. Longtime MAC president and professor Theophilus Abbott said, quote, "To no one man is the college so much indebted as John Clough Holmes." And I say that if one person is the father of MAC and MSU, that's John Holmes. He's a horticulturalist. He moved to Michigan in 1835 and became active in the Detroit Horticultural Society. He was a co-founder of the Michigan State Agricultural Society in 1849, and he served as the secretary of the Agricultural Society from its founding on through 1857. The organization, along with Holmes, were the chief proponents, as I said, of the creation of an agricultural college, he being at the top of the list and adding his name to any instance which could promote that cause. He is the author of the legislation that would create the eventual agricultural college. And in January 1855, he participated in a standoff in Lansing. So he comes to Lansing in January and meets Henry Tappan, the president of the University of Michigan. They meet at the Benton House, which is the first hotel built in Lansing before the Capitol even moves here, or as the Capitol's moving here in the 1840s. So they meet there and they exchange ideas. Tappan indicated that he would use his full force to oppose the creation of an agricultural college and insisted that it be a department within the university. Holmes insisted the opposite, that an agricultural college must be established separate from the university or the normal college in Ypsilanti in order for it to succeed. So Holmes stays in Lansing. He meets with the State House Committee on Agriculture to present his draft bill for the creation of an agricultural college. After numerous meetings, after meeting, Holmes stood strong against legislative objections and alterations to the bill, and he saved it from basically immediate dismissal. The legislature wasn't really having what he had to offer. After his cohort from the Agricultural Society, such that they came to Lansing with him, I think one person came with him, after they left, Holmes persisted. He took the bill to the State Senate Committee on Agriculture and was met with the same negative response. So he assembled a conference committee, or what amounted to a conference committee, of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. And in real time, the group of them, along with Holmes, edited, amended, deleted, and added to that bill. John Holmes' hand is all over that original bill that created the Agricultural College. He made them sit down and work out what they disagreed with him about, what they disagreed with each other about, and they worked out the kinks in order to get this done. Now, ultimately, the bill passed exactly as they edited it, exactly what came out of that conference committee, including the addition of a college treasurer position so that it wasn't handled through the regular state treasury. Holmes was appointed the first college treasurer as a result of that. Holmes urged that the new college be placed under the Board of Education, the State Board of Education, rather than under the guidance of the State Agricultural Society, which he was a member of, which he deemed the society not to be educational enough to run a college. So he preferred actually to see the creation of a state board of agriculture, but he feared that that would cause excess costs and would kill the bill. So he said, as a sort of a compromise with himself, that it be placed under the Board of Education. So he promotes that version of the bill passes. Holmes remains in Lansing from January of 1855 until the bill passes the next month. So for 2-ish months through February 1855, he stays in Lansing and he personally ushers the bill through the legislature. He was promised, but never really received any assistance from any other members of the State Agricultural Society. He was the father of this bill. It was his baby, and he's the one who got it done for the most part. Holmes goes on to design College Hall, which you saw on the first slide, but I'll show it to you again here. College Hall is the first building in America designed for the sole purpose of teaching scientific agriculture. It was built by S.M. Bartlett, who is another agriculturally involved individual. And the building actually now serves as the seal of Michigan State University. So if you recognize that building in the center, that's Old College Hall, which actually stood on the site of what is now Beaumont Tower on campus. Okay, so with the creation of the new school in 1855, Holmes started as treasurer, and he's the first professor of horticulture. And from there, we need to sign the bill into law. So Governor Kinsley Bingham signs the bill into law on February 12th of 1855. The act mandated no less than 500 acres for the college and a location to be less than 10 miles from Lansing. It was also to have an English and scientific course. So it was to have that well-rounded experience for students. So the Agricultural College of the state of Michigan was the first agricultural college in the United States. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Once the act was signed into law, it took 2 years. Over the course of 1855 and 56, the school didn't open until 1857, when the campus was prepared and the courses were prepared. The first students were welcomed in 1857, and none of the earliest faculty were trained to teach agriculture. Most were scientists and academics, but not practical farmers. Even if they'd grown up on a farm, they weren't trained to teach farming necessarily. They were classroom people for the most part. Now, the next step is picking a location. So we need at least 500 acres within 10 miles of Lansing. So whose responsibility is this but John Holmes? So John Holmes oversees the purchase of land near Lansing, just down the road, 5-ish miles down the road. He purchases the 676-acre farm of A.R. Burr. Now, I'm going to try, without a laser pointer, to describe to you the upper left corner map is the best visual I can give you of what the original layout of campus looked like. So up top is what you're going to recognize, the angled roads, right? On the left is Michigan Avenue. On the right is Grand River Avenue. The very bottom of the rectangle is Mount Hope. And then all the way on the right, that little triangular cut of roads by the river there, the vertical one is what is now Hagedorn, and the bridge over the Red Cedar River at Hagedorn. And then the very tip top, the one road that cuts in next to where it says College Farm, is what is now the north entrance to campus, or Abbott Road. So you're kind of getting a grasp on what the original land consisted of. Basically, that historic North Campus area, West Circle, that is that northern part above the river there in the map. So we get this chunk of land. It's chosen in part because it sat along the Plank Road, which allowed for easy access in and out of town and for travelers to stop along there. And its close proximity to Lansing allowed for close engagement going both ways. Now, the legislature wanted to be able to keep an eye on this brand new fledgling institution, but it also allowed for students to see the state government and see everything in action. One example of that is in January of 1859, MAC students Edward Granger, A.J. Cook, who becomes a faculty member down the line, and William Thomas all attended legislative session at the Second Capitol building, and they studied at the State Library in Lansing. So it's evidence of students actually coming down the road, spending time here at the Capitol, interacting with their state government. One thing I'll mention, I did include this 1915 panorama at the bottom. If you've seen my panorama presentation, you've seen this before, but this is taken from atop Williams Hall in 1915, and the Lansing and East Lansing are so close that you can literally see the Capitol along the skyline, even in a photograph, which is one of my favorite photographs for that reason. Okay. Now, the State Board of Education appoints Joseph Williams as president of the new college in 1857. He was a Harvard graduate, so his credentials brought some legitimacy to the new agricultural college. But he didn't last long. He resigned in March of 1859, so that is less than 2 years as president. He was accused of spending too much money and accused of having political ambitions, but in reality, he was too concerned with curriculum and not enough with practical farming, and that's what led to his being forced out of the institution. Upon Williams' leave, the superintendent of public instruction, John Milton Gregory, took the role, took basically the helm of the college. Although he wasn't president, there was an interim president, Lewis Fisk, but the superintendent of public instruction had more of a hands-on approach after Williams left. Gregory, the superintendent of public instruction, his leadership led to less appropriations for the college, the ending of the four-year course of study, and the ending of that broader education. So it was narrowed to just the agricultural focus. So that wasn't a good thing for the agricultural college. Interim President Lewis Fisk, students, and most of the faculty stood up to the superintendent of public instruction and the Board of Education, and they won. We'll talk about how they did that in just a couple minutes here. Williams, that accusation that he had political ambitions was probably correct, because he goes on to run for the local state Senate seat and wins election in 1860. He served just a partial term in 1861 as president pro tem of the state Senate before assuming the duties of lieutenant governor following the resignation of James Birney, who had been lieutenant governor under Austin Blair. So, former MAC President Joseph Williams is now the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, and while he's a senator, while he's Lieutenant Governor or acting as in the duties of the Lieutenant Governor, Williams helps pass the Reorganization Act of 1861, which took administrative control for the college away from the State Board of Education and placed it under the control of a new board called the State Board of Agriculture, just as John Holmes had thought up in 1855. We'll talk more about that in a couple minutes here. The law also, this reorganization law also mandated four-year curriculum. So the superintendent of public instruction's cutting of that was null and void because this new law on the books mandated that. Now, Joseph Williams died just a short time later in June 1861 from influenza, so he never got to see really any of his work come to fruition and the success of this institution that he led from the start. Now, we think about Michigan State University as a land-grant college. So let's talk about where that comes into play, because when it's founded in 1855, it is not a land-grant college. Although that idea is circulating, it was not technically a land-grant college yet. So Williams, who we just talked about, had visited Washington, D.C. in 1857 and 58. The college is brand new at that point, and he played a crucial role influencing Vermont Congressman Justin Morrill's thinking regarding the creation of land-grant colleges. The Michigan legislature had an 1850 petitioned Congress to appropriate 350,000 acres of land, federal land, for the creation of agricultural schools across the country. And the Michigan Constitution of 1850 called for the creation of agricultural school. So Michigan was on the cutting edge of the creation of agricultural education across the country and what became the land-grant philosophy. President Buchanan vetoed the first version of the Morrill Act in 1859. The Agricultural College of the state of Michigan, at the end of the day, because the first version was vetoed, becomes the model and the inspiration for the second version of the bill, which is signed into law in 1862 by President Lincoln. So as the first agricultural college in the country, it allows us to be the model, Michigan State, to be the model. The Land Grant Act allowed for the creation of colleges in each state, using funds raised from the sale of appropriated federal lands in each state, which was intended to teach agricultural and mechanical arts. So there was a specific focus and parameters to it. I'll add that the University of Michigan tried to get the land grant here in Michigan, and that also didn't work out. But the Agricultural College was relatively quickly designated as Michigan's land grant school on March 18th, 1863. The act also, the Morrill Act, also required a military department at the colleges. So along with designating Michigan State as the land grant school in Michigan, they created a military department for the Agricultural College in 1863. The Pioneer Land Grant College, right? It's on the signs. It is the Pioneer Land Grant College. It's not the first land grant college, as much as I think there's debate about that out there. It was not the first college designated by a state legislature to be the recipient of that land grant created by Congress. However, as the first agricultural college in the nation, it served as the model and the basis for the Morrill Land Grant Act, making it the Pioneer Land Grant College. Okay, now we also think about, if we have Spartan football fans in the house, Michigan State and Penn State play for the land grant trophy each fall or every so often. And that is because Michigan State and Penn State were two of the very earliest land-grant colleges, and they happened to be in the Big Ten together. Now let's move along to our next president we need to talk about, and that is Theophilus Capon Abbott. Theophilus Abbott was named president in 1862, served through 1885. So he's around for a long time. He reinstated the four-year course of study, which was mandated in that Reorganization Act that we talked about. And he had been professor of English literature at the Agricultural College since 1858. In the 1860s, the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit Post each separately campaigned to close the Agricultural College, and University of Michigan president at the time, Erastus Haven, said he opposed those efforts. He opposed the paper's proposals, which encouraged combining the university and the Agricultural College. So Abbott personally campaigned the legislature here in Lansing to save the college and secure funding through the decade, through the 1860s. In 1869 and 1870, he got $20,000 for an operational budget and $30,000 for a dormitory construction, which led to Williams Hall on campus, which is the site of the current MSU Museum, by the way, after Williams Hall burned down. The work was done. This work was done by Abbott through the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Education and the House Committee on the Agricultural College. In 1869, a petition to the legislature laid out allegations of shortcomings of the Agricultural College and Abbott and agriculture professor Manly Miles, and the State House threw it out almost immediately. And they gave their full confidence to Abbott and Manly Miles, and the House said, and I'll quote, "The time will surely come when the State Agricultural College will rank beside the university in pride of affection of the people of the state." I think we got there, right? So let's talk about this Board of Agriculture that I've alluded to and mentioned a couple times. The State Board of Agriculture is established in 1861, and the college is reorganized by this Reorganization Act of 1861 that I mentioned. So we take administrative control away from the State Board of Education and place the college under control of the new Board of Agriculture. Hezekiah Wells of Kalamazoo is appointed to the new board by the governor and by his peers as the first chair of the Board of Agriculture. He serves on the Board of Agriculture until 1883, and he is actually said to have spent one entire legislative session, at least in Lansing, campaigning the legislature during another period in which there's an effort to combine the college with the University of Michigan, which is a recurring theme in the early years. In 1877, the Board of Agriculture inquired about obtaining a room in the new Capitol that was under construction, and they received a room on the south ground floor. So if you look at the bottom of this directory, you'll see the State Board of Agriculture there. And they lost my spot in my notes here. They actually met in this room in the Capitol for their monthly or bi-monthly or regular meetings from 1879 when the Capitol opens through the mid-1890s, to my best estimate, is when they either lose that room or stop using it. I think they lose that room at that point. Now, we have a Board of Agriculture that's created at this point. Let's talk about some prominent members over the years of the Board of Agriculture. If you've attended our programs before or know something about state history and women's history, you'll recognize the name Dora Stockman. Dora Stockman was a statewide lecturer for the State Grange beginning in 1914. She was editor of the Grange Newsletter and a founder of junior Grange clubs, which she called Four Leaf Clover. This is the predecessor of the 4-H, by the way. So she's the mother of several of these entities and organizations that we know of today. In addition to this, she's a farmer. She and her husband own a farm and operate a farm. So she has her hands full and decides to add more to that. In 1919, 1 year after Michigan passed equal suffrage for women, Stockman was elected to the State Board of Agriculture. She's the first woman elected to statewide office in Michigan. She promoted education for female students at the Agricultural College, as well as a more well-rounded liberal arts education for all students. This is a through line from those early years, and this is what the farmers wanted for their sons. Following her long and successful stint in terms on the State Board of Agriculture, which lasted through 1931, Stockman ran for the State House of Representatives, where she served 4 terms from 1939 through 1946. I'll mention there are 26 people who served in the legislature and on the Board of Agriculture, and all but, by my best count, 3 of them served it in the order of legislature, then Board of Agriculture. She was the other way around, and I think there's very clearly a reason for that, in that she's a woman, and when you're launching in straight away, she already had a name for herself with the Grange, so tying that agricultural connection together, she had the household name, she had the name recognition to be elected to statewide office through the agricultural angle first before she could be elected to the state house, or would be elected to the state house. Another person who before doing research, didn't realize served on the Board of Agriculture is Governor Cyrus Luce. So Governor Luce was appointed to the State Board of Agriculture in 1884, served from 1885 through 1890. He had been prominent in the state Grange as well, and during his time on the Board of Agriculture, he was elected governor of Michigan in 1886. This is a period when the Grange is a major voting bloc and highly powerful enough to send one of their own to the governor's office. So after he's elected governor, he serves in both capacities. He's governor and a member of the Board of Agriculture from 1887 through 1890. Looking through the meeting minutes of the Board of Agriculture after he's elected governor, he's no longer listed as Mr. Luce, he's Governor Luce, and he's absent most of the time. Or he's showing up to meetings halfway through, which is obviously understanding because he's the governor now. His calendar's a little more full. A couple other people I should mention. There's a list of the 26 people who served in the legislature and on the Board of Agriculture. Two other names that you might recognize are former House Speaker Bobby Krim, who served on the Board of Trustees after he is in the House, and former Congressman J. Bob Traxler serves on the Board of Trustees at one point as well. Now we talked about the board members. Let's talk about some faculty. There are faculty turned legislators as well, or faculty who served in the legislature simultaneously. Two I want to mention, and I'll mention that there are, frankly, only about 7 of them that I was able to identify. The two that I want to talk about are Robert Kedzie and Ralph Young. So Robert Kedzie was the longtime professor of chemistry at the State Agricultural College from 1863 through 1902. During his time on faculty, Kedzie was a state representative from Ingham County in 1867 and 68. Brief aside, his son Frank Kedzie is on faculty at MSC as well. He becomes a college historian by the 1920s. And the chemistry building, or Kedzie Hall on campus, is named after Robert Kedzie. Ralph Young is the longtime athletic director at Michigan State College from 1923 through 54. He had been a coach prior to that of different athletic teams, different variety of sports in the early 20s. After he retires from MSC, he serves 3 terms in the State House from 1957 through 1962, and he dies in office. So those are the 2 biggies, and the others are, for the most part, early 19th century individuals. So those are faculty who serve in the state house, the state legislature. There are a couple who are more interested in higher office. A couple names who you might recognize, again, more modern people. They are Paul Bagwell and Leroy Augenstein. So it's also in this period, by the way, that John Hannah, who we'll get to in just a minute, really is encouraging his faculty to get out there and hold local elective office, be involved in especially the East Lansing community, because he saw by developing and being a good member of the East Lansing community that you're building a good campus community and making it a great place for the families of faculty and students to live. So let's talk about these two. Paul Bagwell was a professor of speech at MSU and head of the Department of Written and Spoken Language. He ran for statewide office several times, including for Auditor General in 1956. When that didn't pan out in the primary, he runs for Secretary of State the same year. That didn't work out for him. He runs for governor twice in 1958 and 1960 against both Governors Williams and Swainson. Lost both of those elections, and he ultimately is elected to the MSU Board of Trustees and serves less than 2 years in 1964 and 65. This is after he's on faculty. He leaves faculty in the early 1960s. The other figure here is Leroy Augenstein, who was the founding chair of the Department of Biophysics at MSU. He's brought to campus to create this department and stays on as chair. He believed that the legislature should be active in education and scientific understanding across the state. He ran for the U.S. Senate in 1966. He lost the Republican primary, pulled out of the Republican primary, and subsequently in 1967 is elected to the State Board of Education. He was seen as the prospective and favorite candidate for U.S. Senate in 1970, but he lost his life in a plane crash in 1969. So his career ends there, and we don't know what the rest of his career might have looked like. There are other major standout faculty figures like Lash LaRue and Walter Adams, who I'm not going to talk about. I'll mention Walter Adams later on, but there are very politically active faculty, especially through the mid-20th century and 1960s. One tidbit that before we get to John Hannah, which is coming in just a second, I want to talk about one fun thing that I found here. This is one of the reveals that I wanted to mention to you all, one of them. That is that we get Spartan Stadium as we know it today, the first iteration of it in 1923. It's built in 1923 using partially state funds. Governor Alex Groesbeck is instrumental in getting $152,000 appropriated for the construction of a stadium out of almost $1 million that the college got in the 1920s under his administrations for development across campus. His biography actually says that it's likely that it took very little convincing of college officials to get him to buy into building a stadium. So he signs off on that. And in the 1930s, when the field is being named Macklin Field after former football coach John Macklin, this is before the Spartan Stadium era, President Shaw, Robert Shaw, who's around for quite a long time before Hannah, actually says, not that he opposes the naming of the field after John Macklin, but he says it really should be named after Governor Groesbeck. It should be Groesbeck Field because of his support and his hand in getting the funds for the construction of the stadium. But he also adds that at the time, that Groesbeck was still active in politics. Although he wasn't in office anymore, Shaw noted that it would have been, quote, a delicate matter to present in order to name a field after an active political figure. So we almost had Groesbeck Field, I guess, guys. Now let's talk about Hannah. So Hannah is the big one here. So John Hannah was a 1923 MSc graduate, so he was a Spartan, and he got his education there. He straight away starts a career with the MSc Extension Service, which it's a post that he holds for almost a decade, and he starts his career as a young agricultural agent working in poultry. And he early on works with Matilda Dodge Wilson at her Meadowbrook farm in Rochester. He helps her develop the farm's poultry stock, and they developed quite a friendship. She was the widow of auto pioneer Dodge brother John Dodge. And after he dies, of course, she especially goes into farming here. She is eventually elected to the State Board of Agriculture herself in 1931, serves through 1937. And while on the Board of Agriculture, she, along with the board, appoints none other than John Hannah to be the secretary of the Board of Agriculture. So she brings her friend back to East Lansing to be the secretary to the board. Hannah, I'll mention, ultimately marries the daughter of MSc President Robert Shaw. So there's a whole web here. Hannah gets his feet wet in politics early on. As Secretary of the Board of Agriculture, he works personally with the legislature. He is basically what amounts to the lobbyist for MSU to the legislature at this point in the 1930s, and his big accomplishments as secretary is getting WPA funding funneled into campus to do all the developments across campus throughout the Great Depression. Now, following the Matilda Dodge Wilson angle for a second, Governor Lurin Dickinson appoints her Michigan's first female lieutenant governor. Upon his ascension is the wrong word to the governor's office in 1939. She serves in the role for just over 13 months in 1940 and early 41. And this is, of course, after the death of Governor Frank Fitzgerald and that whole shuffle that goes on. Ultimately, Hannah and Wilson's friendship lasts for decades, and in 1957, Matilda Dodge Wilson donates most of her Meadowbrook farm to MSU to create an Oakland County branch of MSU, and this branch eventually becomes Oakland University. So that's how we splinter off and create that other institution. One fun or two interesting Hannah stories that show the influence that he had. And if we know our MSU history in the room, we know how powerful John Hannah was. So WKAR is Michigan State's radio station. During one radio broadcast around 1937, station announcers are literally reading Detroit Free Press articles over the airwaves. They read one article about excess expenditures by the then Democratic legislature, and they tossed in there a personal comment about how more Republicans need to be in office. Well, the Secretary of the Board of Agriculture, John Hannah, drags them into the governor's office, Governor Frank Murphy's office, who is incensed by the comment and protested the partisanship of the station. And he reminded them who funds the college and who funds that radio station. Hannah made the WKAR staff meet with the state Democratic Party and apologize profusely, smooth the matter over, and make it clear that that was not the position of the college at the time. So all worked itself out, and John Hannah wielding his influence to solve the messes created, by parties within the institution. So this is a firm example again of him wielding his power and being that firm hand. Another important story is that story of Franklin Duffy. So Franklin Duffy applies and is admitted to the college as an African-American student. So when he applies for board, he's denied because the only rooms that are allotted for students of color were filled. So Duffy promptly writes to State Senator Charles Diggs, an African-American from Detroit, and Diggs immediately himself writes to the Board of Agriculture. Well, Hannah's the Secretary of the Board of Agriculture, so who receives that letter? But John Hannah, who himself within 2 days responds and says the matter's been resolved. Well, the matter had been resolved to a degree. Duffy got a room, but not where he wanted. He wanted to live in Mason Abbott Hall. He got a place in Wells Hall, and he got a space away from the segregated rooming. They set aside a different room for him outside of the allotted rooming for students of color. And then eventually, not the first year, but he did get a room in Mason Hall, by the way. A year later, after this incident goes down, Hannah becomes president, and one of his first acts is actually to integrate student housing. So he solves that issue while he's president. Relatively early on in Hannah's presidency, he hires James Dennison to be his administrative assistant in 1947. Dennison had been the administrative assistant to Michigan Governor Harry Kelly during his second term in 1945, 46, 47-ish. Dennison became, through Hannah and through the university, a lobbyist to the legislature, and a powerful one and a successful one. So Dennison remains with the university through the rest of Hannah's tenure, through the 1960s, actually. It's during this time, while Dennison is still on Kelly's staff, that Kelly actually creates a victory building program. Before I talk about that, I'll mention that Michigan State didn't build any new academic buildings on campus from 1929 through 1940 with state funds. All the development in that period were paid for through self-liquidation of the college. So Governor Kelly creates this program, which is not all that supported by the legislature, frankly, but he asked all colleges and universities for a want list of new buildings for their institutions and the estimated costs. Dennison was placed in charge of this program in the governor's office, and then after he's pulled by Hannah to the college, he is naturally placed in the mix of this decision-making and this planning from the college side of things. Again, the legislature is not fully supportive, but they fund it out the gate, and President Hannah gets funding for 5 buildings, including Berkey Hall, which is the largest classroom building on campus when it's completed. Hannah insisted, when this project starts, the construction on all 5 buildings begin immediately and simultaneously, and this is strategic. The legislature continued to not fully support this project, and ultimately the Senate Finance Committee Chair Otto Bishop of Alpena demanded a construction halt on all projects across the state at all these institutions, and that the Victory Building program end. Well, MSC had 5 building skeletons sitting out on campus, and this was the impetus behind Senator Bishop's move. He saw these half-done buildings and said, why aren't they done? What's happening? You know, this isn't working out. It's not what we intended. So Hannah has a publication put together showing the building skeletons and argues it would be such a waste not to just finish all these buildings that are sitting here, right? And it's a matter of practicality. It's a wasted cost, and it's unsafe to have these shells of buildings sitting there, right? So this was the means to an end. He had World War II vets coming home soon to be students, and his strategy worked, because had he said, let's do one at a time, he would have gotten one building built. But by starting them all, he got all of them built when the legislature said, finish what you started. So that's John Hannah for you. That is his power with the legislature and on campus. One more building story that you should know is that of the construction of Giltner Hall, which is the created as the veterinary medicine building. So in 1949, the American Veterinary Medicine Association threatened to deaccredit MSC because of the lack of or poor facilities. So Hannah and MSC lobbied very hard to the legislature to fund a new facility to save this program at the college. Ultimately, the building that is built over the course of 1949 through 1952 with state funds connects the existing veterinary clinic and anatomy building. So what we know is Giltner Hall today is actually an amalgamation of several buildings out there, named after Ward Giltner, who was head of veterinary medicine. I will put this picture up here because I want you to look at the sign and the line at the bottom, which credits the Michigan legislature for paying for the building. I have no doubt that John Hannah's fingerprints are all over that. He wanted to make sure that the legislature gets their credit for supporting this project and saving, essentially, the vet med program at Michigan State in the 1940s. Now, some university attorneys, which are familiar faces to us around here. Former Governor Kim Siegler was appointed college attorney in 1952. He succeeded the longtime college attorney Byron Ballard, who had died earlier that year. Siegler himself dies a year later in 1953, and he is succeeded by Leland Carr. Leland Carr is also pictured in this picture. If you take a look, that is Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court Leland Carr swearing in Governor Kim Siegler. Both of them were successive college attorneys to Michigan State. Carr had already been on the Supreme Court. He was already a Supreme Court justice when he's named college attorney. Before that, he had been an Ingham County Circuit Court judge. And during his time as a county official, he actually served as a one-man grand jury in 1932, deciding the fate of several alleged improprieties at Michigan State, including within the music department, conflicts of interest among the Board of Agriculture, suspected illegal real estate dealings, and banking issues. So he decided each of those himself from the bench, and then worked for the university later on. So those are two figures that we needed to mention here as well. But let's get into the development of the college further. So it's Michigan State University today. How do we get there? In January 1954, Michigan State College, Hannah, the Board of Agriculture, requests the legislature to change its name to Michigan State University. As talk of this spread across the state, you can guess who maybe wasn't a fan of that, but the University of Michigan, right? So the University of Michigan vehemently opposes this change. Their president, Harlan Hatcher, writes a scathing letter to Michigan House Speaker Wade Van Valkenburg. And the letter found support across the legislature and across the state for that matter. It basically led to the matter being tabled. Hannah actually wrote, along with Board of Agriculture Chair Clark Brody, to just forget about it. You know, it's too much of a hassle at this point. So in the midst of this, while the discussions are still happening, Lansing's own state senator, Harry Hiddle, introduces a bill that wouldn't change the name just to Michigan State University, but instead the Michigan State University of Agriculture and Applied Sciences. So it's not just a university, it's keeping that end tagline that it already had as Michigan State College. So even through this is when Hannah and Clark Brody just kind of say, forget about it. Well, the topic comes back around the next year, 1955. This is Michigan State's centennial year, and local legislators, there's Senator Hiddle again, Harry Hiddle of Lansing, Representative Willard Bowerman, who becomes mayor of Lansing eventually. He actually attended both schools, Michigan and Michigan State, and then Representative John McCune. All three of them were key voices in the movement. MSC supporters presented the legislature, which you'll see on screen here, with a 250-foot-long petition with 11,000 student signatures on it. Ultimately, there were two winning arguments that led to the creation of the Michigan State University of Agriculture and Applied Sciences. Number one, the Penn State College, the other pioneer land-grant college, had already become a university with very little pushback from the University of Pennsylvania. So why can't this work here in Michigan? The second winning argument came from Supreme Court Justice Thomas Kavanaugh, and he ruled that the matter was not unconstitutional. the University of Michigan and the Board of Regents were saying that it was. Kavanaugh said that because the 1850 Michigan Constitution refers to an agricultural school and not the agricultural college, yet the 1908 Constitution changed that to the agricultural college, there was precedent for changing the names of institutions of higher learning. So it wasn't unconstitutional. There was a precedent for it. So that sort of closes the matter here. At the time, in 1955, of the 132 members of the legislature, 29 were University of Michigan graduates and 4 were Michigan State graduates, although 20 had attended Michigan State, whether it was a short course, whether it was a smaller program. 4 legislators attended both schools, by the way. Representative McCune, who we mentioned a second ago, was the key sponsor of the bill. He was a local representative. And U of M law grad, Representative Lewis Crampton, was the most vocal proponent. He was a supporter of it on the House floor. So as this is going on, the Board of Regents and the Board of Agriculture try to come together. They have a conference at the Hotel Olds across the street, and they very quickly realize this is going nowhere in a hurry. So they call it a day and walk away from that. And it is then that the bill just soon passes the House. So they vote in 1955. The House passes the bill 88-14. I'll note that after this, the Ann Arbor News compares it to a football game. After the bill passes the House, the Spartans led at halftime, but they assured readers that they wouldn't succeed in the end. And there were attempts to send the bill to committee in the Senate to kill it there. That did not succeed. The Senate passes the bill 23-2. And on April 21st, 1955, Lieutenant Governor Phil Hart, in the stead of Governor Williams, who was out of the state, signs the bill into law with President Hanna looking on. In the record, it mentions that both the Lansing and East Lansing mayor are there. However, none of those men are the mayor of Lansing at the time Ralph Kriegos. So he must not have been in that photo that was taken. So down the line, as this happens, there's a graduation coming up at Michigan State, and the student body votes almost unanimously to delay their diplomas so they can have Michigan State University on their diplomas. Down the line, James Dennison, who we mentioned earlier, says that becoming a university did make it easier to get appropriations from the legislature. So it was worth the hassle and the feud with the university, made it worth it. Although many remarked that the college had already been acting as a university through its development of departments and programs, this was really just putting the label on what they already knew to be true of it being a university. So they become a university. This is the centennial year. So a centennial includes a full year of major celebrations. It includes a legislative committee made up of a lieutenant governor, a speaker of the House, which are aimed to coordinate the celebrations statewide. And a major Founders Day event is held at the MSU Auditorium, attended by numerous dignitaries, including Governor Williams, that you see here with John Hanna. Let me tell you, I know we are going to run over, folks. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'll try to trim some things out here towards the end, but we're in the back half of this, I promise. This is a photograph of John Hanna giving a presentation, which he did a lot, promoting and advancing Michigan State University. So he remains a force for decades at Michigan State, and he is no doubt the college's best lobbyist and advocate with state government. In 1955, the legislature gives funds to create a highway traffic center at MSU, and this prepared students for careers in traffic administration. This is the legislature mandating a program by giving you funds and telling you you're going to create this program. Also in 1955, the legislature sort of balks at the creation of the MSU Labor and Industrial Relations Center. They said it favored the unions over management. John Hanna went directly to the legislature, testified to the committees, and laid out the fact that Forrest Akers is on the Board of Agriculture. He's the former chair of Chrysler. Management is involved. Management agrees and supports this creation of this program on campus. And it is rounding off what is already offered on the management side with the labor side on the other side. So it's giving students the opportunity on either side. This program that was created is now a school within MSU, created in 1962. And another program that's created that is equally as popular as MSC becoming MSU or joining the Big Ten Conference with U of M is the creation of the four-year medical school at MSU in 1969. Michigan's not a fan of that either, but it happens nonetheless. Hanna, being who he is able to pull quite an array of commencement speakers through the years. He is pictured here with Vice President Richard Nixon in 1957, former President Harry Truman in 1960. These types of visitors naturally pulled out state officials. So here on the right is Governor Williams with Hanna and Truman. Some major speakers also visited MSU simultaneously with or instead of the Capitol, signaling the importance of college students in a college campus being equal to state officials at the Capitol. Another official you should know about is Jack Breslin. Jack Breslin was a 1946 grad, athletic star, returns to MSC staff in 1950, and in 1959 becomes a special assistant to John Hanna. In 1965, Hanna insists that all communications with the legislature go through Jack Breslin. Jack Breslin is the official university lobbyist by 1965, and Breslin says, quote, when I'm in the legislature, I have to work with both sides. I don't believe legislators look at me as either Democratic or Republican, but as a representative of Michigan State University. And we know where his name survives today, of course. Let's move along here to the Constitutional Convention of 1961 and 62, which has a direct connection to Michigan State University. John Hanna, the president, is elected to a senatorial district as a delegate to ConCon, as is Stephen Nesbitt. Stephen Nesbitt is from Fremont, Michigan, and he's a member of the State Board of State Board of Education, excuse me. And following ConCon, he's actually elected to the MSU Board of Trustees and serves for about a decade after that, including a stint as chair. So ConCon establishes the University of Michigan Board of Regents and the Michigan State University Board of Trustees formally as the governing bodies over their respective institutions, which was written into law but not enshrined in the Constitution at this point, and it is now. It also, and Hanna praises this, by the way, he says it gives schools the ability to be preeminent in their field without political interference as much as there had been in the past. It also clarified the role of regent and trustee, set term lengths, and all those important details that needed to be done. I should also mention, I talked about this in January this year, so I'm not going to go into the depth that I wanted to tonight again about it. But all the ConCon furniture from the Civic Center was moved to MSU into the International Center and set up again. We are lucky enough here at the Capitol to have John Hanna's ConCon desk, which was deaccessioned from the MSU Museum. So you'll see it pictured here on screen, and that's here at the Capitol in the Capitol's collection. Other Hanna Capitol connections are that in the late 1960s, this is a brand new discovery that a colleague of mine made. Hanna is appointed to the Capitol Restoration Advisory Committee in the late 1960s, alongside Governor Romney, Lieutenant Governor Milliken, Speaker Joe Kowalski, and both the presidents of U of M and Wayne State. This committee was to ensure the Capitol and other state buildings were symbols of the state's political and social heritage. So that sounds very vague, and I have not read up enough into it at this point, but Hanna was involved in this, and this is through the development of the Michigan Capitol Complex out back, and the South Ottawa Tower State Office Building, which opened in 1982, was dedicated to John Hanna in 1991 following his death. You'll see that up there. So the John Hanna State Office Building has existed since 1991. Now, let's get into some of the Vietnam protests. Because these are a big thing that does involve the Capitol and a direct physical correlation between the two. So in 1969, there are protests raging on. There is one that I want to mention before that very briefly that I discovered in 1965. There is a protest of about 50 MSU students who are part of the Campus Committee for Peace in Vietnam, who marched from East Lansing to the Capitol, and they were met with kind of a unique situation. All of the House and Senate page boys formed a counter picket line supporting the war in Vietnam, and they were applauded by some members of the legislature, actually, out on the Capitol lawn while this group of students was coming up to the building. So throughout the 1969, there are a string of protests, many of them that sort of build and build and build and build and swell. Of course, we know about this. And there are talks of using state police. Governor Milliken actually routinely offers the use of state police if there are protests that are impeding the operations of the institution. So there are things like this happening. So this leads to, I'm not going to go into detail as I had planned about with some of these protests, but this leads to, in the midst of this, John Hannah announcing his retirement. Now, in 1968, early 69, we knew John Hannah was retiring. He planned to stay through June, basically in title only, but President Nixon appoints him to be the head of U.S. and he takes that role, and as a result, sort of gets out of the mix of these protests that are going on in 1969. One of the major protests takes place during his final State of the University address at the MSU auditorium, which turns kind of into a wild protest, which I'm not going to go into for time. This left the university without a president, and the question of who would succeed John Hannah, the force who had been at the head of the university for more than 30 years. And this is an interesting discovery for me, and that the first name floated is G. Mennen Williams to take over the presidency of Michigan State University. There's a swift movement by some members of the Board of Agriculture, the Board of Trustees at this point, to name G. Mennen Williams as president. He had recently lost the 1966 U.S. Senate race, and by all accounts was interested in the job. But most of the rest of the Board of Trustees and the campus community just wanted a president separate from politics. They, as a result, appoint economics professor Walter Adams as interim president, which give them the time to conduct a national search. So they get a president who's not at all involved in politics, right? Walter Adams takes the helm of the university for about 8 months in 1969. And during this time, there was already worries about faculty getting involved in student demonstrations. Well, we've taken it a step further. It's not just faculty involved in student demonstrations, it's the president of the university leading a student demonstration at this point. And this is a great photo that I have to show you all. And I'm going to name some of the people you're seeing there. The man in the center with the sunglasses and the cigar, that's Walter Adams. To his right, so your left on the screen, is Representative Jackie Vaughn. To going the other way from Adams is Josephine Martin, wife of Blanche Martin, member of the Board of Trustees. Next is Don Stevens, chair of the Board of Trustees. Next is Representative Ray Hood. And next is Representative Thomas Guastillo. So there are 3 state representatives up there, the chair of the Board of Trustees, the president of the university, and a wife of a trustee, along with who knows who else is there that we can't see in these photographs. I have a video. I'm going to play 2 seconds of it because it's so cool to see it in motion with them arm in arm leading this protest. Walter Adams looking like a cool guy with his cigar and his sunglasses in his mouth, right? Okay. So moving on from that, now he's served his 8 months as interim president. January 1970 rolls around. Who's going to be the official replacement? Who's the full-time replacement of John Hannah? Well, Walter Adams is a candidate. There's one of these stickers floating around, which you'll see up there that say Adams for president. Some people really wanted him to stay on as president. The students, as far as I can tell, really adored Walter Adams and adore him still today. But he's really encouraged to go back to his teaching position as an economics professor. And he's happy to do that. He's happy to go back to economics. He is a leading economist sort of nationally, internationally. So he does that. G. Mennen Williams has floated back around. He's never vetted. He never goes through the application process to become the president of the university. There are 4 candidates. Among them is Clifton Wharton. So the Board of Trustees selects Clifton Wharton. And when they vote, 3 trustees vote for Soapy Williams to be the president of MSU, and a bipartisan group of 5 trustees vote for Clifton Wharton. So Clifton Wharton becomes president in January 1970, and the rest is history and Clifton Wharton's presidency. However, protests don't end with Clifton Wharton. There wasn't a magic touch that made those go away, right? Vietnam's still raging on. Students are still demonstrating. So the one other protest I want to mention is the Kent State protest. These are some images from out front during our Kent State protest in May 1970. One of the students killed at Kent State was Jeffrey Miller, who had been an MSU student before he transferred to Kent State. So that struck a chord with MSU students. More than 6,000 students gathered at Beaumont Tower in protest, and more than 12,000 flooded the Capitol lawn. Now, this doesn't show the peak of it all, but you can see the row of them down Michigan Avenue in the background there. Governor Milliken himself spoke at this rally, and it actually led to the spring quarter at MSU being canceled. So there was a lot going on in that spring of 1970 in terms of demonstrations. Now, on a lighter note, anytime an athletic team wins a championship, they're going to come to the Capitol. There's two key moments in Spartan history for that: 1979 and 2000. If you are a Spartan, you know those dates. Here we have the 1979 NCAA champions, the Michigan State Spartans men's basketball team. Pictured there is Governor Milliken with Greg Kelser and Magic Johnson behind him right on the Capitol steps. These are stills from great footage at the MSU archives of the parade and the whole rally and the event and everything. It's fantastic. The other instance of that is 2000, of course. Here's Tom Izzo and his Spartans raising the national championship trophy on the Capitol steps. You can see some of the stonework if you look close enough behind them, and the parade and all that goes along with these celebrations. And if you're thinking about, we're coming to the end here, if you're thinking about direct connections between Michigan State and the Capitol, and you think I've forgotten one, I haven't. Teddy Roosevelt's visit in 1907 is the big one. So this is that direct use of the Michigan Avenue corridor between the two institutions. There are parades, there are all kinds of things that happen along that route over the course of the last 170 years. A big one, the big one, if you will, 1907 is the visit of Theodore Roosevelt, President Roosevelt. MAC President Jonathan Snyder travels to D.C. to personally invite President Roosevelt to campus to deliver the commencement address for the 50th anniversary of the Agricultural College. Roosevelt agrees. He comes to Lansing. He is greeted by Governor Warner, the mayor of Lansing, Hugh Lyons, all the officials. He comes to the Capitol. He meets with Governor Warner. He speaks to a joint session of the legislature. He's said to have given an impromptu speech off the governor's balcony on the front of the building. And he's driven from the Capitol to MAC by R.E. Olds in a Rio automobile. He is joined in the car by R.E. Olds, Roosevelt's secretary, and MAC President Snyder. So they go to campus. They're entertained at the president's house. He gives the commencement address there in North Campus, hands out the diplomas, including to the first female African-American to graduate from MAC, Myrtle Craig, who you see here on the screen. Myrtle Craig had a direct connection herself to the Capitol. Her uncle, Horace Craig, was a mail clerk for the Attorney General's office. He read all the correspondence coming in and out of the office and worked closely with the Attorney General themselves. His son, Donald, took his post after him, served in that position into the 1960s. Donald's grandson, Craig, becomes the first black House page in 1951. There is a string of Craig family members who are directly involved in the Capitol and connected to that one really important visit from a president here at the Capitol in 1907. After his visit to MAC, he's driven back to the train station in an Olds to represent both automobile companies in Lansing at the time to cover their bases. One more thing, and then I'll conclude. Referring to these dignitaries that are visiting, and some of them choosing MSU over the Capitol, sometimes they do both. In October of 1960, John F. Kennedy did both. He spoke on the Capitol steps and at the MSU Union on the same day, October 14th, 1960. Two fantastic photos of that. There are other instances of people traveling down that Michigan Avenue corridor. Douglas MacArthur is, of course, paraded down Michigan Avenue in the 1950s when he visits. There are plenty of parades. The MSU band regularly escorted, including Douglas MacArthur, in their treks down Michigan Avenue. It's a place of celebration and ceremony for a long time, for decades and well over a century. So MSU has produced 3 governors, Blanchard, Engler, and Whitmer. And I'll mention that even if Soapy Williams wasn't successful in becoming president of MSU in 1969, John Engler was almost 50 years later. John Engler was the interim president of MSU in 2018. 26 sitting members of the current legislature went to MSU, 7 senators, 19 representatives. And this last slide is a great encapsulation of that relationship going both ways. whether it's a governor like Governor Murphy delivering a commencement address, or the Spartan Marching Band marching in a parade between the two institutions, Sparty playing with kids on the Capitol lawn. Athletic teams like after the 2014 Rose Bowl, Mark D'Antonio and his Spartan team coming to the House floor, which you'll see down in the corner. And then once upon a time, every single athletic champion or success and victory in East Lansing resulted in all the students trekking down to the Capitol and celebrating on the Capitol steps. And up here you'll see representative of that, some of the Cadet Corps members around the turn of the century. So that's all I have. There's a lot more to say, but I'm going to end it there and take any questions you might have. Only 11 minutes over. We did it. Yeah.
The former history librarian at MSU, and you said that the MSU museum used to be Williams Hall.
The site.
Site, okay.
Yeah.
Because the MSU museum was the second library.
Correct.
Good talk. And then the other U of M thing that some people still remember, that in the early 50s, U of M did not want MSU to join the Big Ten.
Correct. There are two books about that.
To the university, they were the only Big Ten member at the time that did not let MSU.
Yes. Notre Dame helped them in that effort, but Michigan were the chief opponents of Michigan State College joining the Big Ten in the late 40s. Yeah. Valerie.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Did the Board of Agriculture change to Board of Trustees?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that 1959. Yeah. Yes, sorry. The Board of Agriculture becomes the Board of Trustees in 1959. It's the same sort of entity. It just changed names in 1959.
Legislative?
Great question. I think so, but I can't swear to it. Yeah.
You mentioned Hannah's last address was interrupted. How out of hand did the interruption then?
Yeah. So I mentioned Hannah's last State of the University address being sort of coinciding with the demonstration. They didn't interrupt it so much as maybe outshine it. So he's speaking in the MSU auditorium on Farm Lane, and there's the demonstrators right out front. I think I read that there may have been a vehicle flipped over during this. There's a whole lot going on, and it's during this. I think that is one of the instances that state police has used to quell things, because it's at this point that both Hannah and Governor Milliken say that if you're impeding the operations of the university, you're no longer, it's not free speech anymore, I guess. It's not a peaceful demonstration. It's sort of the angle that they were taking at that point. Any other questions? Yeah, back to you.
The other state where you had a problem with the established school was Indiana. Indiana University fought against the establishment of Purdue. They even put in on the outskirts a little demo garden to show the legislator, look, we're into agriculture too. But John Purdue gave a ton of land for the cow school, and that's why it's called Purdue University.
There we go.
All right. Was there one back here too? Yeah.
Yeah, so you said they were the pioneer, but not the first land grant.
Mhm.
Get it?
Mhm.
That Kansas State, you know, or do you know who it was offhand?
I think you're right. I think Kansas State was the first one created by their legislature using the Morrill Land Grant Act. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for coming, and I'm happy to answer any questions up here if you have them. And by the way, next month, May is going to tell us all about Mackinac and the Capitol. So that'll be a great program. So be there for that.